Good afternoon. Today is June 10th, 2026, and it is 7 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my office at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas 77494, which is located 300 feet away from the residence of Robert Mueller, who is a former director of the FBI, and it's also in front of Joel Grade, who supposedly was the CFO of Baxter International until March 2026, because he was removed from the, supposedly, I don't know if that's true. That's what, I found on the internet. And it's also next to John Miko from US Foods. And all this is relevant to what I'm going to tell you. Before I begin, I want to apologize because, well, for different reasons, my voice is not very good today. I'm still recovering from a respiratory infection, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a bit. And also, I've had some, let's call them logistical challenges in the last 25 days. So it's a situation that is a bit uncomfortable. But I'm telling you this, please don't feel sorry for me. I'm okay. Like, it's not, I have thick skin, and I've been through worse. Like last year, they put me through a very similar situation for 50 consecutive days. And at the time, they took my son. Right? It was so between March 28th and I think May 15th. I didn't know where the child was, and I was in a pretty similar situation like in the one that I'm today, where I could not leave the house. To tell you is that I've been through worse. Last year it was a worse situation than this, and I survived it for 50 days. So, and I could have survived it for more if they hadn't called me to that hearing with Richard Bell. I think I could have lasted, I don't know, 60, 65 days. I don't know exactly how long I would have resisted without food, but because if I can't leave the property, I cannot go buy food. That's the challenge, right? But on the bright side, in the last 25 days, that Troy Pickett and Oscar Telfair and all these actors have put me through this situation. I've lost those couple of pounds that I had of overweight. So that's good. So don't feel sorry. Like it's I'm okay. But anyhow, yes. So it's I'm just basically apologizing for the voice, and I might cough. I'm gonna try not to cough, but it's a reflex if I can't help it. So anyhow, so this is declaration D137. I think it would have fit on as the last segment of the last series, 136, but because it's already too long, it's, I think, close to 6 hours if you combine the segments. So I'm going to make this a standalone segment, the 137. So no, a series of very interesting things have happened that I haven't been able to document in this way because of all these reasons, right? Like I've been suffering from this respiratory affliction, and I'm just getting my voice back today, so I'm able to speak a little bit. But anyhow, so I guess I'll start by this, right? If you watch the previous segments, the 136, like all those segments, you will see that in one of them, I realized that this escalation with the capias on the trial court started one business day, really, one day, after I filed that DFARS that I sent to Emil Michael and other people in the Pentagon, naming potential infringement of intellectual property by Lockheed Martin, this huge defense contractor. And I've talked about them in the past in other contexts, right? But I guess I didn't understand how fundamental or how sensitive that was, right? And I mean, things escalated, right, when I said those things, but when I made those disclosures, but not to the point of issuing an order to arrest me, right? I mean, so this was a new level of escalation that I haven't seen before in 25 years that I've been dealing with this, right? So that told me that, that entity, Lockheed Martin, is probably one of the most important entities. It's just pure logic. Uh, because if they took the steps of issuing that order to arrest me, violating the process and all those things, like using the trial court as a. So if the actors here in Texas took that route one business day after I sent that DFARS, it's because I hit a nerve. Right? So when I see these, I didn't mention this in the previous segments, but this is more like I want to walk you through what I thought and offer you my perspective on how this evolved in situationally. And um, and sorry if I'm a little bit slow. It's a challenging environment right now. Uh, so I also have to be careful what I say because I don't want to give them any ammunition. Um, but yeah, so when I see, right, that I hit a nerve with that, that reminded me of a great thinker. His name is uh, his name is Ego Calderon, right? So he's a he's a he's a he's a singer, right? Latin American singer, and he has a song uh, in which he says something. I mean, it's a bit colloquial, right? But he says something along. I don't know if you have something like this in English, but it's something like he says something like, when somebody doesn't like soup, you give them two bowls, right? So that's exactly what I applied. Right? I applied his line of thinking. So knowing that this is where it hurts, I mean, the DFARS and the defense contractors, I went all in, right? And I started looking into my patent portfolio. And I'm going to tell you this, right? I did the exercise of looking into the data I have to see which companies could be potentially infringing into my intellectual property. And then, out of that said, I started researching which are military contractors, defense contractors, who sell things to the military. And that's intersection of the ones that are potentially infringing on my intellectual property and that are also selling stuff to the military. I created the FAS for them as well, and I sent them to the relevant procurement officers for those contracts, for those companies. And this led to a whole new set of circumstances. But I'm going to tell you one that I think is funny, right? Because it's one of those examples in which they create situations that come back and bite them. And I've made this joke before, right? Like at some point I compare. I mean, I'm talking about the attorneys, right? Like the judiciary and quasi-judiciary offices that are doing this, right? At some point in 2025, I made a kind of a meme or a cartoon of ACM law. I don't know if you see the previous declarations, you will see that. They engineers these circumstances all the time that at the end come back and bite them. And I think this this is a pretty fun example of that, right? So what happened was, I'm gonna give you the sequence, right? I see this thing that this really hurt them because they issued that order to arrest me. Then, I mean, the order didn't come out the next business day, but they started doing the things in court that will result eventually in that order to arrest me. And that process got started one business day after I filed that DFARS. So, I remember Tego, and I said, well, I have to give them two balls of this. And I started, doing my research to identify candidates, and I started sending the DFARS. And if you watch some of the other declarations, you will see that I apply this concept of the train. Right? And the train is it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's basically when you see a situation that carries legal liability or exposure to an individual that is part of this network, if you're in my shoes, what you have to do is you have to take that situation and package it in a way, and then send it to another person that maybe doesn't have the same degree of liability. But when they see this information, they, depending on the role, right? But say, I'm going to give you a concrete example. Imagine that is the general counsel of a company, right? Or the outside counsel. If they become if they come into actual knowledge of, for example, a crime committed by their client, they are obligated to report it, right? Particularly if it's a crime against the court, right? So if that individual, if that attorney sees the information and doesn't act on it, then he is creating liability for himself. And then I can take that, I can send it to somebody else. I can forward that package that contains the two previous notes. And so you see, it's like a train of liability, right? And the more they do it, the more they ignore what I'm telling them, it is worse because it creates more liability for more people higher up, right? Because I will keep escalating it. I will keep sending it higher and higher and higher, right? And the train keeps growing and growing and growing. So that is the concept of the train in the legal term, right? So what happened was that I see the DFARS, right? The situation with the DFARS that at the end resulted in this order for my arrest being issued for in an extrajudiciary manner, like violating due process. The court doesn't have jurisdiction, like all these things, right? But doesn't matter, like they did it, right? And that's the reason why I cannot leave the house, because if I drive, they're gonna impound the vehicle, and they're gonna seize, my cameras, and they're gonna seize the equipment that I have in the cars, the computers, Anyhow, it's a situation that I don't have a solution for, right? I'm stuck in here. I'm really sorry. So anyhow, the situation, when I see the situation with the DFARS, and I remember about, Tego's song, and I said, I want to create more DFARS, and I sent more DFARS. The thought that came into my mind, well, this is like a train, but it's nuclear. That's what I thought. It's nuclear because, well, these are military contracts, right, that are worth in aggregate trillions of dollars. The US is the country with the highest military spend in the world. And it's a big chunk of the GDP in the US that goes into military expenditures. And, I've had some thoughts about this after after I debugged all this and I see, a different situation of what I thought it was before. My perception of the situation changed, right? I think I see what's happened. But I'll tell you more about that later, right? After I tell you how these things evolve. So anyhow, I thought, this is a nuclear train, basically, right? And I don't know, this is one of those things that happen randomly, right? Like when I say that, I'm saying that out loud, like to think when I'm thinking, right? And I think, well, but I don't know. It got into my head that the concept of a nuclear train doesn't exist. Right? Like, no train is powered by nuclear power. This doesn't exist in the world. And when I see that, right, when I see that, I think, well, this is strange. The human race has been around for thousands of years, and nobody has ever thought of putting a nuclear reactor on a train. It's strange. So there must be reasons. My thought was there must be. Bro, I'm sure I'm not the first person that had this thought, right? So my immediate reaction is, there must be strong reasons for not doing this, right? So I thought, well, maybe it's a risk of collision. Like if there is a crash, the reactor will explode and it will be a nuclear catastrophe. But I didn't think it was the case because there are nuclear submarines, and that is even worse because if a submarine explodes for any reason, then if that was a risk, then the water would be contaminated, right? And it could contaminate an entire ocean. Like I think it's a terrible because we cannot live without water, right? If an area gets contaminated, you can close it, you can move to another area. But if an entire river or an ocean, it's it's worse. So I don't know. To give you a short story, I started researching this, and I came up with, I don't know, like 10 different reasons why this wouldn't work. I mean, putting a nuclear reactor on a train. And I started researching this using the internet, right? Like looking for, whether my 10 hypotheses were the real reason. Basically, it turns out that I mean, I got most of them right, right? Um, but one of the biggest reasons is really the tensile strength of the couplers in the train. Well, before I tell you that, when I thought of that, right? If we put a nuclear reactor, a small nuclear reactor, it doesn't have to be like a Chernobyl plant. It has to be a very small reactor, right? Like the ones used in submarines, something like that, right? If it can fit in a submarine, it can fit in a train. Um, uh, and use that energy to power the train, right? But initially, when I started thinking of this, I was thinking of a very long train. Like, if you could make a train that is 20 miles long and you could drag it with this enormous amount of energy that now you have because you're not burning fossil fuels, could you do it, right? I mean, it could be a way to move, all the cargo you need to move for a month from San Francisco to New York, right? In one load. You put this, 20 train together and you send it, right? From San Francisco to New York. Uh, But it turns out, right, when I started doing this research, there's a group of people that thought of this before doing this train, but they had a different motivation. The motivation was energy cost, right? So the idea is, their idea was, if you have a nuclear train, you basically pay for the energy once, right? When you build the nuclear reactor that you're going to install in the train. And then you don't have to fuel that train in 20 years. And the train is running for 20 years with no cost of energy. So you pay for the energy up front. You don't have to buy the fuel from Venezuela, China, Iran, etc. Right? You don't need to do that because it has a nuclear reactor. And I thought, well, that's another good reason to do it. I mean, besides the fact that if you have so much energy, you can move a longer train. I mean, this is a powerful reason to do it, right? So I started thinking about these things more. I don't want to get into this, but I got to a design, basically a blueprint, if you think about it, of how you can achieve these, and you can make actually a train that is almost limitless in longitude. You can drag hundreds or thousands of carriages, of wagons of cargo in this train, and it wouldn't break the couplers, because the problem with traditional trains is that the traction is on the locomotive, like at the front of the train, right? It could be powered by electricity or other means, but it's always in the front. So if you put too many carriages on behind the first vehicle, that vehicle is basically dragging the weight of all the carriages behind, right? And that creates a lot of tension in the coupler. And if you put too many wagons, it will break, because there is a physical limit of that metal bearing tension and compression. Um, So I came up with a design. I'm not going to go through the design here, but I actually filed a patent application for this. Actually, two patent applications that are related. And as in my previous patent applications, I granted the U.S. federal government a perpetual, universal, worldwide, no royalty, no fees, an immutable license, meaning that I cannot even get back from that. Like, even if I change my mind in the future, I can't, because it's immutable. And this statement of grant of this license is embedded into the application. So it's not a document that I created after or anything like that. It's embedded. It's in the application. And I submitted this to the USPTO, to the United States Patent Office. Patent and Trademark Office. And this is a tremendous, I mean, that's what I was telling you at the beginning, right? Because, this invention, don't take my word for it. Like, we have to wait and see what happens with all this. But from the numbers I've been running and the calculations I've been doing, it seems to me like this will potentially transform logistics in many different ways, worldwide, and the defense industry itself. Um, but I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to get ahead of myself. But it's one of those things that this train of thought wouldn't have occurred to me because I wouldn't have even thought about a nuclear train if they hadn't issued that cap yet. So I mean, this is a consequence of their actions, because I wouldn't have thought of that phrase. I wouldn't have researched that. It wouldn't have happened, right? And they would have kept moving trains with the fossil fuels that China, Venezuela, and Iran and Russia sell. But if this turns out to be the case in the next, I mean, this is probably going to take a few years to develop. But if this turns out to be the case, this is going to drop the consumption of fossil fuels by a lot. Because I mean, I'm talking about a train, but the way I structure the applications, the patent applications, is really a logistical system. It's not necessarily a train. It could also be a convoy of oil tankers, for example. So imagine, so today an oil tanker is composed by a ship that has a compartment where they put the oil. Okay. Imagine that instead of that ship that is tripulated, it's just a cargo container, right? And it's part of a convoy of cargo containers that are being dragged by one ship that is powered by nuclear power. And the power is distributed across all the ships, in all the nodes in the convoy, in the way that I described in that patent application. It would work. So it is not restricted to land, is what I'm trying to tell you. This is applicable to other areas, water, sea, air. Like there's different applications of the same principle. And all of them are covered by this patent application. One of the reasons, I mean, I didn't know this, right? But I didn't know this, but it's an interesting fact. I want to share it with you. I didn't know that, and I learned this while researching these topics. I didn't know that if you look at the market of, and don't quote me on the numbers. I might be off a little bit on the numbers, right? But this is from what I get from the internet. This seems to be the case. It seems like if you look at the market of fossil fuels that are used for maritime transport of goods, right? If you look at the global consumption of that amount of fossil fuels, something like 30% of that is consumed by oil tankers. And, well, not oil and derivatives like oil, gas, and so these specialized tankers that transport fossil fuels and their derivatives, like plastics and things like that, polymers and polymers. But I mean, that is an amazing fact. I mean, it means, I mean, for many different reasons, right? First, it means that it's very costly from a fossil fuel perspective. It's a very costly process to keep this industry running. I mean, the industry of the fossil fuels, because if you need to transport that, those products near to a port where there's going to be a ship or a vessel sailing from that port, you need to transport the products there, right? And so to keep that maritime industry running, 30% of the fuel consumed is consumed by the tankers that transport the fuel. I mean, this is a tremendous problem, right? And not even getting into the problems of environmental costs, right? But it's a tremendous problem because it's paradoxical. It's paradoxical because to keep the machine running, you have to consume 30% of the energy that the machine is outputting, right? I mean, from an engineering point of view, this system seems to me like an abomination, right? But the more troubling problem I see is that I don't know, like this could be, I don't know if this is the chicken or the egg, Like, I cannot tell you that. To be honest, I think it's the chicken. Um, but I don't know. It could be that, right? But the most troubling problem is that the countries that control the biggest reserves of fossil fuels are these countries that are doing this, right? China, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, right? Uh, so this creates a problem because, I mean, from a logistical point of view, obviously, but also from a geopolitical point of view, because they have they have a disproportionate power over the world commerce, because everything that moves by sea is, they have the key to that fuel, right? So I don't know. And it gets worse if you look at who controls the you know the downstream processes of refining those maritime fuels. If you look at who controls those industries and, the distribution channels of that, it gets even more worrying. I mean, for the U.S. and Canada and, Western countries. But, let's not get into that. Anyhow, if you are powering this convoy on the sea using one nuclear reactor in one vessel at the front, distributing electricity to the nodes that are on the back, you could carry 7, I think. I did the math, and, this math I did is pretty rudimentary. I might be off here, but and the assumption is that if you use the same type of reactor that is used in one of those US Navy aircraft carriers, those carriers, some of those are powered by nuclear power. And this is standardized already. They have a nuclear reactor that is made for this. If you take that reactor, one like that, right, and you put it on a ship like the one I'm describing, and you couple it with a turbine to generate electricity, the output power that you could get from that array is enough to hold or to distribute power. When you're not holding them, I recommend that you read the patent application so you see what I mean. But you would generate enough electricity to be able to move 7 oil tankers in a convoy, assuming that you use the same generator. If you use a more efficient reactor or a more efficient turbine, or you could achieve more, right? But so what this means is that you could move 7 oil tankers without spending any fossil fuels. So this would drive the efficiency of the shipping industry to the roof, because now this 30% of fuel that is consumed by the same machine to just keep running itself is not going to be consumed anymore. Right? But of course, the governments of those countries that control those natural reserves wouldn't like that, right? So it's a self-perpetuating problem, right? I think that's what it really is. But anyhow, I'm telling you all this because I think this situation with they're reacting to me filing a defarce, which is I'm within my right to file that. I mean, the military can say no, we don't. We did the audit and we determined that you have no claim here. It's possible, right? But the one thing that they can do is retaliate using this trial court in Texas, right, as a vehicle to have me in this situation where I cannot leave my office. But because they did that, all these series of events occur, and the combination of these is that now these patent applications exist, and the U.S. military and the federal government of the U.S. have the right to use them however they want, wherever they want, forever, without paying a cent to anybody, and not to me. I'm not going to receive 1 cent from this. But it's going to hit the geopolitical nerve that I'm describing, right? So, I mean, the cost of that, if you think about the cost of that CAPIAS order, I mean, these 25 days that they had me here so far, and I don't know how long they're going to keep me here. And I'm going to tell you what I've been doing to, stop this situation. But if you think about the cost that this will have in a couple of years, I don't know how many years, but at some point, this is going to materialize into an actual geopolitical cost for them. And if you think about the cost of that capias, it's going to be one of the most expensive capias that they've ever issued. I think that's what's going to happen. But again, let's see. Let's wait and see what happens. But again, because now this situation, evolved in this way that I'm describing, and as I mentioned to you before, I, you know, took a page from the manual of this great thinker, Tego Calderon. And when somebody doesn't like a soup, you give them two bowls. So what I did is that after I filed those USPTO applications, I compiled a book, a new book, and I published that book. It's a printed book that is published, and also you can download it for free. You don't have to buy the book. And this book compiles all the DFARS applications that I filed with the military as a result of this sequence and their escalation. Really, they started this with the captains. Right? So I put them all in the book, and the book also contained the foundational patent applications of the atomic. I call it the Atomic Express. That's the name I gave to the. It's a satirical name in a way, right? But I call the book Atomic Express, and I published that book. And so I want to introduce you to the book. I want to show you that book, and I want to invite you to read this book if you have the time. It's a book that I designed this book in a way that it's easy to consume. Like it's not full of legal filings, and it's all about the DFARS. And I also want to tell you why I believe that you have a vested interest in this issue. Like, don't look at these as, these are two nerds fighting over some patent, right? This has a direct implication on you, and not only because these are technologies that protect your freedoms, but because you're paying for these technologies. I mean, these $1 trillion contracts, excuse me, are being paid by the US government using taxpayers' dollars. So we are all paying for that reason. All I'm asking for is an audit, that the military audits those procurement contracts and reviews my documents and my filings against what they're building and supposedly designing, right? And then make a determination. Yes, so this is the book over here. Okay. Yes, so let me expand this a little bit. Yes. So this is the cover of the book. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the cover. But I'll tell you a little bit at the end. Not get derailed with that. Another thing I want to tell you, I created a dedication page. Please read the dedication page if you have a chance. Yes, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But yes, so if you look at the index, you will see that it has a compilation of DFARS that I filed in this manner that I'm describing for contracts of companies that may potentially be, excuse me, infringing on my intellectual property. That I have already granted licenses of use, perpetual, immutable, and worldwide, with no cost to the U.S. government and the U.S. military. And I invite you to read the the specifics, because the specifics will give you a lot of information about other topics that may be very relevant to you and to your privacy, especially. So anyhow, when I started doing this initiative of of the Atomic Express, right? The patent applications. Let me show you. Let me show you that one. I think it's one of the first pages in the. Yeah, the introduction is relevant because all these tech companies that have been, I would call them really technical adversaries for 25 years, right? And some of them employed me. They went to the extent to employ me, and um, are also military contractors in the way that I'm describing. Like these companies also sell products to the military, phones, computers, operative systems, everything that you can think of. So I invite you to. I don't want to spoil it for you, but read the introduction of this book. Is I really invite you to do that. So you have the original emails that I sent to them, and here you have the application. Like these two applications that I touched on this book are about the Atomic Express technologies and the Marcelo loop technologies. But when I sent them the DFARS, I also attached in those emails the other 53 patent applications. So they are in knowledge of all the intellectual property. You know, but if you read this one here around more or less on page 33, or depending how you count the page numbers, but around page 33 in this book, you will see the actual patent application, the poster here, the printer here. And here you will see this is a satirical diagram that I made. See, the receipt is here. Yeah, so I filed the USPTO application on June 5 for the train, right? For the not the train, like the logistics system. So anyhow, yes. So when I started working on this specific patent application, something happened. I want to tell you this. It's a bit of a serious topic, right? But I'm gonna record it here in case, because like I know they're pretty desperate, and they may go crazy, right? So what happened is the following, and it's relevant to this. As part of the legal harassment that they have had me under for the last year and a half, um, they stripped all my parental rights. So to see my son, I have to do it on a supervised visit because supposedly I'm crazy. Right? I mean, that's their narrative. Right? When they created that case, they were going to say that I'm delusional. Right? So they created that, and they stripped all my parental rights, and they are still stripped. Like today, if I want to see my son, I have to wait until Thursday to see him on a supervised visitation. Right? All the visits, even if it's not the Thursday one, like if there's an additional visit that the other party agrees to allow, it has to be supervised, right? Because supposedly I'm crazy. And this is a technique used, primarily was invented, I think, by the Russians, almost almost a almost a century ago. Right? They were already discrediting political opponents and whistleblowers by questioning their mental capacity, calling them crazy, psychotics, and medicating them and things like that. So this is not new. And this has happened in the US as well. There's been many whistleblowers in the last 2 or 3 decades that have been stripped of their parental rights in exactly the same manner. It's a playbook. But anyhow, what happened was there was a supervised visit on June 4th. And when the supervised visit happened, the supervisor of the visit came with the child to this office because I cannot leave the office for the reasons that I already told you. I see the child. The child is in perfect health. I don't see anything wrong with the child. Okay. There is another visit on June 6th, supervised. The supervisor comes with the child. I see the child. The child is in perfect health. I don't see anything wrong with the child. Uh, um, Yet the supervisor made a comment that the child had to be taken to the emergency room because supposedly he had an ear infection. Um, I don't know. I thought, well, strange that I don't see any redness. He's not, crying. He's not complaining about pain. I touched him and he didn't seem to have any symptoms. I trusted what they said. We had the supervised visit on the 6th and they left. They were here for 3 hours. Uh, in less than 24 hours, I became extremely sick, like terribly sick, with this respiratory affliction that I still have. And today is the 10th. So it's been 4 days and I haven't been able to get out of this situation, right, with this respiratory affliction. And this happened less than 24 hours after they left. Now, I have to tell you, I mean, this property, this office, since May 15th, because they have me in this situation that I already explained. And nobody else has come into this property except the supervisor and the child in those two occasions, like June 4th and June 6th. And I became, and this property has 1 acre of terrain surrounding it, right? So this could not be an aerial virus that came from a window, right? Or because I opened the door and the virus came. It's impossible, right? This had to be brought by the supervisor, right? Because the child wasn't having any symptoms. So what I did was that I asked for, because, as part of these orders that these actors have entered in this court when it doesn't have jurisdiction, some of those orders give me the responsibility to pay for healthcare expenses if they occur. Right? So because of that, I asked for a receipt of the prescription because I'm obligated to pay. They have to give me the receipt. So they gave me the receipt, and I'm gonna show you. Right? I saw something in the receipt that is concerning. Right? Yes, so this is the receipt. Right? I, of course, redacted the name of the child, the prescription, all those things, but you can see that the prescription was actually filled on the 31st of May. So 6 days before the June 6th visit. So this is strange, right? And the other thing that is strange, it's strange because, if this was filled on the 31st of May, why didn't they mention this on the visit of June 4th, which was the first visit in which I saw the child after this prescription was filled? They didn't say any of this. They told me on the 6th. And then I got sick immediately after. Right? The other thing that is concerning is that if you look at the supply, the doctor gave a supply of 15 days of antibiotics to this 4-year-old child. I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not going to tell you that I know about medicine, but what I will tell you is from common sense, right? From what I've heard all my adult life, this seems a little bit strange. 15 day, a course of 15 days of antibiotics for a 4-year-old child that has no visible symptoms. So I don't know. You can put two and two together, right? And there was another incident like this in 2025. There was an incident in which I made a disclosure publicly about a defense-related issue. I haven't left, and that same child was targeted with the virus at a local store here in Katy. Days after that, and I have this document. So this is the technique. This is the technique they use, right? When they get desperate, they apply the biological weapons. Right? So what I did, right? I documented this. At this stage, I'm not accusing any corporate actor of corporate malfeasance. I have to be clear about that, right? It is possible. I think there's. It's at least, right? If an investigator from, I don't know, the FBI or somebody, right, that has authority to investigate these things, look at this timeline, this prescription, the quantity, and the timeline of events, and the fact that nobody else has come into this property, I think at least the question should be asked, right? But if that's the case, right, It could be that one of these corporate actors have inside a rogue actor. It could be an aggressive executive, right, that is concerned about a bonus, a multi-million dollar bonus. It could be a rogue council uh, that has, access to budget, and they might be misappropriating funds from the corporation to pay for these things. Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly how it's engineered or how it was acted upon, right? But what I can tell you is that, I mean, in my experience in the last, years, I would say 4 or 5 years, fighting with them on these different tech areas, this has happened several times where, when they're losing, then they deploy. I mean, to give an idea, right? In the last 6 years, I think I had COVID something like 7 or 8 times. It's crazy, right? Without even going out of my house. It's something that it's hard to understand, right? So anyhow, what I did is that I drafted a disclosure. I called it that way, a document that I sent to the legal counsels of Palantir and Lockheed Martin, informing them of this medical timeline. And I sent them to them. And you can see the email here, and it's a registered email, and they read the email. I have the receipt showing that Kevin O'Connor, who is the general counsel for Lockheed Martin, he works at lmco.com. That's a big law firm. He read it, and also Ryan Taylor also read it from Palantir. And what it says is basically exactly what I'm telling you here. Um, and I'm asking them to conduct an audit to see if there's any funds from their legal or operational budgets missing that could have gone through something like this. I mean, that converted by a rogue actor internally to pay for something like this. But you see, this happened one day after I filed that USPTO. So again, I do something that touches the military, because this patent is, I mean, the applications of that for the military are tremendous. Um, so I do something that touches the interest of defense contractors, and this happens the next day, right? Like when I filed the DFARS on April, the next business day, Troy Pickett started with a sequence of events on this case in the 387th Court in Fort Bend County, Texas, that in less than a month resulted in an order to arrest me, right? So, you know, it's hard not to ask the question, right? So anyhow, I also in this email also CC it, and you can see it here in the header of the email. I CC key players from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs because, well, multiple reasons. But notably here is the general counsel of Goldman Sachs, and also Michael Lee, who is the compliance, he's a partner at the firm, and he's the chief compliance officer, or something like that, right? The equivalent to that. And Sinera Strain, who is also a partner. And these names, I'm just not throwing names here. I worked side by side with these people at Goldman Sachs less than 5 years ago. Sinera Strain was my manager at Goldman Sachs. At some point, she was my manager. Michael Lee was my dotted line. I don't want to say manager, but like, let's call him boss. Like he would give me instructions on what to do. Right? He would send me on trips to Bangalore, India, directly. Like he would give me orders. Right? So I know these people very well. And they're also in receipt of this, they're in actual knowledge of this information, that there might be an effort to physically harm me with a biological agent. Now, I also in this notice inform them, because they may not know this, right? I imagine they know, but if in case they don't know, I told them that I am a political refugee, and the official status is protected person status under the Refugee Convention of 1951. And so I don't know. I think I think the total cost, the invoice for that capias is going to be hard to compute. And to be honest, I'm at the edge of my seat. I want to see what's the invoice. um, yes, but like all these dynamics uh, um, led me to really understand something, right? I mean, this is a theory. Like I have no qualifications to give an opinion on this, right? Like to make this conclusion, I think this would require an investigation from multiple agencies together, right? This is a theory. Let's call it a theory, right? But I see back on things that I saw in the past, and I think I see what this is, right? Uh, so if you've read this book, I could have been like, think it's a distributed attack on the financial system of the U.S. military in this case. Uh, so if you read this, right, and this, this made me remember. I'm going to tell you that here. I recorded the first declaration I recorded. I'm an engineer. I haven't been doing these declarations and recordings for a long time. It's just a matter of a few months, a little bit over. I think a little bit over a year at this point. But the first thing that I recorded it in January 2025. January 27, I think was the exact date. Don't quote me on the date, but and it's here. Like if you look at I'm gonna tell you how to find it because if you have time, check it out because it will let you see things, right? So in the copyright notice page of the book, which one of is I think the second page, there is this link to this thing that says database.capias-f35.us. That will take you to the first declaration that I recorded, which was in January 2020. Sorry, there is a problem there. You copy and paste. Let me check. I see. Yeah, it's like it has an extra space. Yeah, it will take you to this, right? It's a 45-minute demo. It doesn't have my face on it because at that point I didn't, didn't have this setup that I have right now. But I'm telling you this because in this demonstration, at some point, I say something like, and this is about a database that was leaked to me on the year prior to this, so in 2024. That's what this demo is about. And I analyzed the database using technology, and I realized that this is a paramilitary operation. That's the word that I use, and I'm telling you that I used that word more than a year and a half ago. And I used the term paramilitary, and I said something to the effect of, the solution to this has to be a military solution. The solution to this is not a legal solution. It's not a court. It's not a judge cannot deal with a paramilitary group. A police force cannot fight with a paramilitary group. It's impossible. They will lose that fight. That's what I said. So when I see this evolution with the DFARS, the thought occurred to me, right? That if you look at this, and you listen to that declaration or demo that I did on January 2025, the logical conclusion here is that this is nothing else but a group of foreign military attacking the US military, but not with bullets and weapons. They're attacking them financially by extracting the funds. So this was a profound realization. This is a method of attack, right? So because of this, I dedicated this book to a set of military officers from Venezuela that have been legally and physically harassing me for years, right, in different ways. And they are in the dedication page of this book. Because if we're talking about military, it makes sense to put the military of who are the military doing this, right? I mean that I can see directly, right? And these are people. I mean, the people in the dedication page are people. I mean, most of them. There's like two or three people that I don't know personally because I haven't had the pleasure to meet them in person yet. I hope that I get that soon. But because I haven't met them, doesn't mean that I don't know that they are doing this, right? Because then the reason I know is because all the other people in that page, in the dedication page, I know personally, and I know that they have a 1 degree or at most second-degree connection to those three people, right? So that's how I know. It's like, you know, you don't have to, if you have 10 roads and all the 10 roads lead to the same place, that entity has to be involved. Like that's the logical consequence, right? We have a saying in Spanish. It's something like, you don't have to say dog. You can just show the bone, right? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I may not have direct proof that these three military officers from Venezuela are doing this directly, but I have 10 people connected directly to me, family, even family relations that they form with my family, connected to them, right? So I don't have to say dog. I will show you 10 different bonds, right? That's what the dedication page is about. But interestingly, and this is where it gets really to the next level, one of those people in the dedication page is Ana Codalo. Ana Codalo is interesting because Ana Codalo is the daughter of Peter Codalo, Colonel Peter Codalo. He is or I mean, imagine today he must be general or something, right? Or maybe he has an unofficial title. I don't know. But back in the days when I met Ana Codalo, so I'm talking about 2005. Around that year, he was a colonel at the Venezuelan military. Uh, and he's the father of Ana Codalo. And Ana Codalo and we started dating because that's the way they um, do what they do, right? We started dating, and eventually we even got engaged. We didn't get married at the end; we broke up, but we were engaged for a period of time. But what's interesting about Peter Codalo is that Peter Codalo was the second man or the right hand of somebody called I think it's Peter. Let me look him up. I don't want to give you the wrong name. So it's something related to something called the Plan Bolivar 2000. Yes, this person, Cruzweffer, right? So General Cruzweffer was the boss of Peter Codalo. Mentioning this because this Plan Bolivar 2000 was a plan that was created back in Venezuela to basically make the military take on a bunch of different activities in the country. And it was a multi-billion-dollar plan that was supposed to last for years. So this was just like months. This was conceived months after Chavez took power. Chavez took power in January 99. And by early 2000, they created this plan with Cruzweffer and Peter Codalo at the helm. The result of that plan was that there was, I don't know how you call that, it was a corruption scandal of billions of dollars. The money was lost, the construction that they were going to do wasn't done. It was a disaster, right? And the money got lost, and the country suffered unmeasurable losses because of that. I'm telling you this because remember, I have a direct connection to Ana Codalo and Peter Codalo. So and Peter Codalo is connected via Cruzweffer to Diosdado Cabello. It's obvious, right? Um, but the interesting thing is not that, right? It's not. I'm not showing you a proof. What I'm showing you is a pattern, right? What happened in Venezuela with the Plan Bolivar 2000? If you think about it, what is that happen? Well, it was a series of actors that defrauded the military spending and the military budgets, defrauded the military and took money out of the military, which is what I'm alleging is happening with a different mechanism. Here is with the intellectual property, right? But it's at the end, My contention, my observation is that it could be the same thing, right? So maybe this is a more general, it's possible, right? That's why I'm saying that this is something that needs to be investigated by a team of people of multiple countries. But it's possible that what we're seeing, or what I'm seeing here from my limited view and perspective on what I have on this, is that maybe this is a TTP, maybe this is something standardized. If you want to take over the resources of a country, you do it by extracting money from the military in whatever way you can, right? Via corruption, via intellectual property theft, whatever, right? Double billing the military for technologies they already own the patents for. It doesn't matter, right? But the important thing is to take money out of the military. It's an interesting weapon if you think about it from a military concept, because, well, for multiple reasons. It's a weapon that is infinite. You can draw any amount of money you can, right? I mean, there's limitations, but the limitations are not dictated by physics, are dictated by not getting caught, right? As long as you don't get caught, you can keep extracting money. Secondly, you are weakening your adversary. I mean, if you are an adversary of the US military and you are taking their budget in this way, that money is not going to go to weapons that could hurt you, right? So you are weakening your adversary from inside, from the bank account, right? Before the weapons even get made. It's ingenious. Third, it's also ingenious because if you look at the G7 countries, their military expenditure is high, super high, and this makes sense. I mean, it's like if you go to a neighborhood, right, where there's a lot of rich people, like Rincon in Houston, right? That neighborhood has only like 7 houses, and each house is worth $15 million or more. Like, there's no house there less than $15 million. So of course, if you go there, there's going to be high security because these people are rich. I think the same applies to countries, right? So if you are in the G7, you probably have a high military expenditure, right? Because you have to protect. I mean, there's going to be many countries that will want to get a piece of what you have, right? But it's ingenious because, well, you are targeting. If you do this, right, you would be targeting countries. I mean, if you're an adversary and you want to weaken your adversary, and your adversary is one of the countries in the G7, uh, by targeting their military apparatus in this way, with this financial weapon, um, you not only weaken them, but at the same time, you have a high potential of extracting money for yourself that then you can use to create weapons to attack them, right? So I mean, it's a quadratic effect. You're weakening them at the same time. You're getting a strength yourself to attack them further in other ways, right? And not only that, it's also brilliant because you can manipulate the environment to multiply the effect. How can you do that? Well, you can incentivize conflicts. You can create fake conflicts, right? There is a conflict in some part in the world. And then, the US military has to send ships and aircraft carriers and throw bombs, and who makes those bombs, right? And who builds for those weapons to be built? Um, so you could, stimulate the market across the ocean, creating a conflict. I'm not saying that all the conflicts are fake. I'm not saying that. But maybe they're exaggerated a little bit. Like maybe the conflicts could last less time, or maybe there wouldn't be as many conflicts. Right? But if you have a way of extracting money from the military in any way, the existence of the conflicts is beneficial to you. And there's no other way to put it. I mean, it's just logic. Right? I mean, if you have a way of extracting extra value, right, more than you should have been paid, either by stealing intellectual property or billing for intellectual property the government already has, or by doing a Plan Bolivar 2000 or a version of it, like whatever the mechanism is. But if you have that mechanism in place and you create a conflict, or you outmain the gravity of a conflict that already exists, you're going to get more money. And it's logic. Um, So I don't know. What I'm trying to give you is an invitation, really, to forward this video to somebody, if you know anybody in the military, in the intelligence circles. And I think I made a similar plea to this on that January 27, 2025 demonstration. I think I ended with that, or I started it with that. Like, if you know anybody that works in the military or that has a family member in the military, forward this information to them, because it doesn't take much to change this situation. All we need is one person that knows somebody that sends this to somebody that can do something about it. So that's really is my plea to you, because this requires a team of people to investigate what is going on. But the closing thought, I think it is that it's too much of a coincidence that Ana Kodalo came into my life in that way, and then these people have been stealing my work for years. And she's related to Peter Kodallo, who was on the Plan Bolivar 2000 at a very high position. And now what I find, 21 years later, after I met Anna on the first place, is that a similar extraction of capital is happening from the US military, but via global building for intellectual property that the government already owns. So it seems to me, what it seems like that this is how the Chinese, right, the CCP, the communist, the Communist Party of China, or the Chinese Communist Party. That's the way they attack countries, right? It's like, before, and this is what I was telling you at the beginning, that it changed my perspective on things a little bit, because I thought before that the way they would do it would be by, they do it in different ways. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like one avenue, but this is, one of the main avenues for sure. You would think, they would take the treasury, right? Don't get me wrong, like, but the real weapon of extraction is this, because this is less audited and they can exacerbate the cost of the military campaigns. On the treasury, there's limits, there are checks, there are balances, there's spreadsheets, there are balance sheets, like there's audits. Like, it's harder to extract capital from a treasury department of any country. But from the military, all you have to do is to create an emergency, right? A war, a conflict, or at least the threat of a war. And that's enough, right? That will drive the expenditure up. And that gives an opportunity, right? So having understood that, what I see makes sense. This thing that I'm seeing, it all makes sense to me now. This collusion of judges, attorneys, and military personnel with corporate actors, right? Because what they're doing, obviously, is that they're using this system, right, to extract this capital in this way, and then use that capital combined, in the case of the US, with the 401k money that we all contribute, and then they use that pool of money to place the CEOs of the companies that they want to control. And the CFOs, like Joel Gray of Paxton International, who lives just in front of me, to make sure that they can perpetuate the cycle with the 401ks. Right? So I guess, what I'm telling you is the result of this debugging of the last, I don't know, I would say 3 or 4 years, when I became aware of, what was happening. I think that would be my conclusion, right? That's what I just described is basically it, I think. But the good news is that if that's the case, it's treatable, because, well, we know where we have to hit them, right? And that's why I created that book. And I dedicated it to that group of military personnel of different countries. So I, invite you to read the dedication page. So with this, I'm gonna close this segment. And if you know anybody that could, before I leave, I have to tell you, I filed an emergency application with the Supreme Court of the United States, asking them to quash that capias. I sent the applications to Justice Alito, who is the judge that oversees the Fifth Circuit, which, Texas is part of that circuit. I sent the package. It arrived on Monday. I think it was June 8th. Yes, June 8th. It arrived on the 8th of June to the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington, D.C. I also emailed the clerk asking the clerk to, please process my filing. I have filed things with the Supreme Court of the United States before, and they always reject them for different reasons, like technicalities, formatting, things like that. Like because once they rejected the filing because there was a missing two-letter word in the cover page of the file. Right? And the filing was describing a situation in which the parental rights of a citizen had been stripped without due process. But anyhow, this is more this is more urgent because they have me in the situation of office arrest for 25 days at this point. So I sent that. I emailed the clerk, but they haven't replied to me, and I haven't heard anything about that case. Another interesting thing that happened yesterday, I received an email from the Government Accountability Project. And this is a nonprofit organization that is supposed to help whistleblowers that are in situations like mine. I applied for assistance. I said that I would pay for their fees. I would pay for the attorney fees, but I need an attorney that is not compromised by this network in Texas. And I filed that like 3 months ago, and they declined to help me. Like they sent me an email saying we consider your case, and we think it's not, we're not going to. But yesterday, strangely, I received an email from them apologizing because of a delay in processing my application, something like that. So I replied to them and I said, listen, don't worry about the delay, but the situation is even worse now because now they have me for all purposes imprisoned in my office. I cannot leave the office and I cannot go buy food. And I have been rationing my food a lot for the last, I don't know, 10 days. So I asked them if they would reconsider, but they haven't replied either. So I don't know. Telling you all these, not please don't feel sorry for me. I'm okay. I can take it. But if you know anybody that could do something to, um, you know, uh, put this in front of the clerk of the Supreme Court of the United States or in front of the Government Accountability Project or a real authority that can help me, I would appreciate it. So anyhow, with that thought, I think I'm gonna close this segment, and I'll see you on the next one.